Alrighty.
Uh,
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. I got almost 500 viewers. I'm hoping to hit 500 today.
Wow, that's pretty spicy.
How you
Good
doing?
stuff. Okay,
How you doing, Zoomer Nation?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
Nice. All right.
brilliant.
So I
Okay,
guess I'll let you do your thing, Chud Logic.
yeah, no problem. So, as I said, we're here today to discuss a question that has fractured the left for the past probably year, I'd say. Is the dirtbag left a force for good? Now, I don't think it really needs too much of an introduction. It's pretty straightforward. I think everyone knows which side each person is on. But without any further ado, what I'd like to do is throw it over to Xander Hall and give you the opportunity to lay out what the dirtbag left is first.
Okay, absolutely. So the dirtbag left has a lot of definitions that people like to throw around. Depending on who you're talking to, their definition of dirtbag left will be very different. Some use it as an insult or a pejorative, and others use it as a mode of identity that they agree with. Typically, when I'm called dirtbag left, I typically disagree. But regardless, the definition of dirtbag left that I would give, assuming we're not using it as a pejorative, would be a leftist who engages in edgy humor, performative cruelty, and uses their rhetoric to appeal to a more edgy demographic. This may include, not being afraid to use ad homs against people who are bad faith actors or bigoted, or using edgy humor as a way of supporting certain minority groups. For example, making a joke like, "Oh, you don't want to use trans people's preferred pronouns. I hope you don't mind not using your preferred kneecaps." Right? Like it's obviously like a pretty edgy joke, but it supports trans people. Those are the things that come to my head when I think dirtbag left.
All right, I'd say that's a pretty apt definition. Like, we can operate with that definition with this debate if you want to. But my fundamental issue with the dirtbag left is that through the use of performative rhetorical tactics, it alienates the broader left as a movement. And I think some of the language and rhetoric I see from people in the dirtbag left, and I know you don't consider yourself as much in the dirtbag left as someone like Vosh, but even some of the sort of rhetoric and language you engage in can be alienating to the broader left. And I think that fundamentally you're sacrificing the movement for the left and leftist unity and leftist solidarity for this desire to appeal to like chuds to get them into our movement by using and emulating a particular type of rhetoric. And I think that when substantive critiques are levied against the dirtbag left, oftentimes what you see is the term woke scold being thrown out there when you provide a substantive rhetorical critique of something that's said by someone in the dirtbag left. I myself have been accused of being a woke scold often when I simply levy basic criticisms about the nature of language. And as leftists, we should reflect and ponder upon how we use language and rhetoric to try to appeal to broader swaths of the population or to try to create solidarity and unity amongst marginalized communities. So I think that sometimes marginalized communities feel uncomfortable with the sort of rhetoric that's espoused by people in the dirtbag left. And I think that it's essential that we sort of address this central grievance, I'd say.
Okay, yeah, you got a few points there I want to go through. So the first one that you made, you can stop me if I miss any or I mischaracterize your argument. The first point that you made was that the broader left may or typically does feel left out or alienated by the dirtbag left. I don't particularly agree with that. I think the people who take massive issue with the dirtbag left or feel alienated by the dirtbag left are honestly a minority of people on the left. It seems like the people that have like huge problems with the dirtbag left are just a really loud minority that you see on Twitter, like going into like breadtubers, or I should say the more dirtbag lefty breadtubers responses and like calling them transphobic pieces of shit and telling them to delete their channels and shit like that. I don't see those people as being like a majority at all. I think generally the left as a whole, at least if we're talking about the online left. I mean, the broader, like outside of the internet left, is really hard to talk about because we don't have data on that, right? But if we're talking about the online left, I think generally the online left, if it doesn't consist of people who are dirtbag leftists, or at least accepting of them. And then you also brought up.
Okay,
Okay,
can I
sorry. Yeah,
interject
you
for
can.
a second?
Sure,
Yeah,
absolutely.
just to address the point about obviously we can't like verify with like an empirical study what exact number of people are opposed to the dirtbag left. And I'd agree with you that there is a significant amount of people who support the dirtbag left, largely because YouTube and these platforms are predominantly white people and people that are not as often marginalized, although there is a significant amount of marginalized people in the Breadtube community. But I'd also argue that there is a decent amount of alienation and divisions that I think is problematic. And I feel like to say that, you know, the people who want to say delete your channel and you're a transphobic piece of shit, I don't think that's indicative of everyone who's opposed to the dirtbag left. I think that's just a certain contingent of people. Like, if we were exclusively using the term woke school to describe like Christy Winters, for example, I could see some validity to that, but it becomes a slippery slope. And I feel like oftentimes the anti-dirtbag left, it seems as though it's indicative of people that are always saying delete this channel, or you know, you're a transphobic piece of shit, and it's not indicative of that entire group of people. It's just indicative of a certain contingent of the anti-dirtbag left.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. Someone who would identify as anti-dirtbag left and that they see the dirtbag left as an enemy rather than an ally that they maybe just don't really find a lot of interest in, but they're like, yeah, I mean, they're bringing people into the left, and that's good. People who, like, identify as anti-dirtbag left or even anti-Breadtube, which is a thing I've been seeing in a lot of Twitter bios lately, last week with all the Twitter drama that's been happening. Those are the people that I refer to when I talk about woke scolds, which is a word I'm trying to phase out now. I don't like the word woke scolds. I'm using the word wokelet and woke scum now because the origin of woke scold is yikesy. But I understand where you're coming from with that. But I would still argue that I don't think the majority of people on the left see an issue with the dirtbag left at all. And I would argue that the good that the dirtbag left does severely outweigh, or I should say, momentously outweighs the bad that could possibly be done.
I think that what defines the anti-dirtbag left is people that are opposed to sort of this performative cruelty that we view as alienating towards marginalized communities. And I could agree with you that your content and the content of someone like Vosh does do a significant amount of good, but it's in spite of some of the ableist rhetoric and problematic rhetoric, not because of it. I think that that component, the dirtbag component, which to me undermines the broader intersectional message you're espousing, I feel like we should retract and move away from that. And I feel as though a significant amount of the anti-Breadtube people and the anti-dirtbag people, they're not the crazy, you know, person who wants to cancel everyone and, you know, calls you transphobic piece of shit. I think many of them have legitimate grievances that we need to address. For example, you oftentimes use the word triggered. Many people would refer to me as a woke scold for having a problem with that. I think that that term is problematic because it refers oftentimes to people who have PTSD, who have post-traumatic stress disorder, who have gone through serious things like rape and, you know, have these certain triggering moments, and they feel uncomfortable when you sort of loosely use that term that's oftentimes appropriated from right-wing rhetoric and language that right-wingers.
All right, I want to acknowledge that point really quickly. So, do you think it's simultaneously possible to satirically use a word like triggered in a way that doesn't cause broader harm to people who may be affected by like actual triggers like PTSD and whatnot, and to use that as an effective tool to grow the left?
Not necessarily. I don't think it's productive to growing the left by saying person X is triggered by this specific type of thing. Like Caitlin Bennett is so triggered right now. Like I don't think that's a very productive.
So the problem is it does, and we know this. Like this is the closest to data that you can have on this, is because if you put the word triggered in your video, even if you're a leftist content creator, the views fucking skyrocket. Way more people see the video, and if it weren't for the fact that there were people who are left of center online that are willing to use words like that. When my chud ass stumbled across Destiny years ago, and if he wasn't willing to say things like triggered and be like, oh yeah, oh god, Steven Crowder fucking triggers me so much, he's so fucking stupid. If that wasn't like the way that he acted, if he came off as like another BuzzFeed SJW is what I would have said like back then, I wouldn't have given him the time of day, and I would probably still be a reactionary, if not worse, today. I do think that the ability to engage in that type of language and to appropriate reactionary language for a good cause is really important to the efficacy of the left.
Okay, so there's a few fundamental points I want to make here. So First of all, I don't believe it's necessary to sacrifice our values and principles in order to try to appeal to broader audiences. I think one of the fundamental components of being a leftist is to feel for marginalized communities and try to use our language and rhetoric in a way that's open towards them. And I think that we can still, try to appeal to large masses and audiences and be edgy, but not in a way that's somewhat toxic in my view. That's the first point I'd make. The second point I'd make is that I don't think there's two perspectives. One perspective is that the left should get as many people as possible, make the tent larger, and use this kind of semi-divisive rhetoric to appeal to larger crowds. The other perspective is, hey, let's try to focus on unifying the leftists that already exist under this tent. Let's try to get them unified and riled up for our movement instead of trying to create these subdivisions. And that perspective essentially suggests that even if we have less people, we're bringing people in by using edgy sort of language that isn't toxic, and we're building on the foundations we've established. And I think that there are some dangerous implications to bringing up triggered or dead naming and those kind of jokes and memes and stuff like that. I think there's some problems to that.
All right, a few points that I want to go through there. So for starters, I would argue that that saying triggered in like a disaffected way, that like using that word, appropriating it as ammo against conservatives, against people on the right, is probably one of the most harmless expressions of edgy rhetoric I've ever seen. Like, I'm surprised you would take issue with that. I know why, but I haven't seen a lot of people who take issue with that. I imagine there are people out there, but the people who do tend to be a bit bad faith usually. However, I understand there are valid criticisms when it comes to that. And you make the argument that some people want to grow the left in general and others want to unite the currently existing left. Even if yesterday or tomorrow we wake up and the entire current existing left is completely united. Tankies, woke scolds, dirtbag leftists, you're just every single leftist in the world had just come together and was completely united. No more infighting, no more anything like that. We would still be crushed by the capitalist ruling class, by the right, and by fascism in general. The left needs to grow, and it needs to grow quickly. The right, reactionary thought in general, is like taking a surprisingly problematic hold among especially younger people. Don't get me wrong, Generation Z is obviously extremely progressive. It's just new generations tend to be more progressive, but there is a pretty alarming boost in the popularity of fascism and reactionary ideology among young people, especially towards certain minority groups, particularly trans people. That's why I spend so much fucking time defending trans people on my channel. I mean, go to my videos. Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted, like, before we get into like too many points, like, and feel free to interject also, but like, I feel as though the whole thing about not a lot of people getting offended by the word triggered, it's also because like a significant amount of people don't deal with PTSD and all these like serious issues. So we need to take that into consideration when we're looking at like the aggregate population. And also, you can address that, but can I make one quick point also? The point about significant amounts of people coming into the chuds and getting into Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro and all those problematic reactionaries, I'd agree with you. And I'm not saying don't be edgy, but do you really think like the term triggered or all that is essential to grow an audience? And I'd also furthermore point out that I just don't think it's beneficial to the left in aggregate to create this divisive sort of language and rhetoric and like alienate the marginalized communities that we're supposed to stand for. I think instead we should be edgy and funny and do it in a way that isn't sacrificing sort of the foundational principles of leftism, which is being open towards marginalized and disenfranchised communities.
Okay, so I understand where you're coming from with this. The first argument you made was that the reason why you don't see a lot of people getting upset about the word triggered being used, like ironically by lefties, is because not a lot of people deal with PTSD. I would say the left in general is probably a group where you're more likely to encounter people with PTSD than anywhere else, because the left is way more accepting of people with mental illnesses, which is a good thing, obviously. So I don't really agree with the idea that like, oh, it's because there's not a lot of people who deal with PTSD. I'm pretty sure like a significant amount of people in my community probably definitely have some form of like severe trauma in their past, especially the trans people in my community with like family abuse,
But
things like that.
the vast majority of leftists,
I don't even
like
know if I
all
would say
communities.
vast majority. I would say maybe a small, like a fair amount of majority. But most of the left is made up of people who are part of marginalized groups, and I would say that most people who are part of marginalized groups have dealt with traumatic events and probably have some level of PTSD.
Yeah, we'd have to isolate the people who have PTSD and do like an empirical like analysis. But I'd probably say that if we were to just isolate and look at what people with PTSD and all these like serious things, I feel like you get a very mixed response because I do think that word has some sort of negative connotations to it.
Okay. So moving on forward, I really want to focus on the point that you made earlier, saying that we're like, not excluding, but sort of, what was the word that you used? I'm brain farting right now. I'm on 4 hours of sleep right now. We're sort of pushing away, marginalized groups that we're supposed to stand for. Is that what you said?
I'd say to a certain
Alienating.
degree.
Sorry, alienating was the word I was thinking of. Yeah, sorry.
Let me clarify, by the way. To a certain degree, I'd say so.
Okay, so I understand that perspective, and I should clarify that I think like you're probably one of the more like reasonable critics of Dirtbag Left, which I appreciate because most critics of this are very different about how they go about their criticism. But regardless, I would probably disagree with that. I don't think that most people who are part of these marginalized groups see leftist content or dirtbag leftist content as alienating, especially when we're using our rhetoric and our edginess to defend them. Quite viciously as well. I think there's a pretty big difference between like a leftist, like a non-dirtbag leftist saying, well, trans people are valid because gender is a social construct, and so on and so on and so on. And then someone saying, okay, if you don't see trans people as being valid, you're fucking stupid. The data is out there. It's readily available. Sex and gender aren't the same thing. Gender is socially constructed. Your gender is how you identify. If you disagree with this, you're fucking stupid, and you should probably kill yourself in Minecraft. I feel like I feel like the good done there is pretty significant.
But that's the problem. Some of this alienating language is also used against leftists. For example, Vosh, referring to the cancel contra people, called them dejected, degenerate queer folks. And he used the term queer in a descriptive fashion, but many leftists who are part of these marginalized communities might feel offended by that kind of language. And even if it's not used towards leftists in particular, even if you say, like, for example, I'm becoming transphobic now because Blair White is so stupid. Now, obviously, he's not literally becoming transphobic. Obviously, he's memeing to try to appeal to a broader audience. But many people feel alienated by that kind of language because they find it as too divisive and offensive to their own identity and what they stand for.
Okay, so I assume you saw the clip chimped video on Twitter that iHypocrite posted of Vosh with like the calling like the people criticizing ContraPoints like dejected, degenerate, like queer people.
I didn't get it from iHypocrite. I got it from a transnational.
Okay, that video was posted around a lot. Vosh did a video where he explains all of the things in that video. It was massively cut out of context, which I guess you could make the argument that if he's going to say things that could be cut out of context like that, it's a bit irresponsible. But
could you explain like the context that justifies that?
Oh, absolutely. So there were a lot of people who were going after ContraPoints and were like harassing her and pushing her to I guess you could say a form of self-harm. She was like, she's been indulging in like alcoholism. She's an alcoholic. She was very depressed. She was dealing with like a lot of mental issues and was compensating for those mental issues by drinking a lot, which was really unhealthy for her. And those people were celebrating it. They were celebrating her being upset and being miserable. And Vosh was calling those people pieces of shit.
Yeah, so the problem is like he was talking about like not just the broader cancel contra movement.
No, he was. I've watched the whole stream. I was there when it happened live, and I've seen Vosh do the explanation. I I know you saw like the clip. It was the video that you
No,
saw.
but he was talking about like the people who wanted to cancel Contra, and that goes into a whole discussion.
No,
about
he
whether or
wasn't
not
talking about people who
cancellation is
wanted
valid.
to cancel
This,
Contra. People who are just saying I don't agree with ContraPoint's
that's
platforming
incorrect.
bucket. No, I watched the stream. He wasn't talking
I
about
can.
people. He wasn't
I,
talking about people who were criticizing Contra or even canceling Contra. He wasn't talking about people who said I don't agree with ContraPoint's platforming Buck Angel. I don't think I can support her content anymore after this. He was talking about people who were viciously attacking ContraPoints,
I
calling her
can.
a piece of shit, attacking her friends, and reveling in her
No, he
misery.
specifically said that people who want to cancel Contra are dejected, degenerate.
You
People.
haven't seen
Even if you
so you haven't seen the
no,
context.
even if you add the entire. Okay,
You haven't
first of
seen the
all, even if you
context. How do you
even
know?
okay, let
Okay,
me.
let Zumination just say his piece,
Okay,
please.
all right.
Okay, so all I'm gonna say is this. Okay, even if you're to add, let's operate under this assumption that if you see the full context, he's referring to those people.
Mhm.
Okay, so do you think dejected, degenerate queer people who lives in their mom's basements and who's jealous? Do you think that's like the most apt way to describe them? Which I'm operating under the assumption that if you look at the whole context, he's exclusively referring to the people that are driving Contra to suicide, which I don't agree with that presumption. I think he's referring to the broader cancel Contra movement, even if he's in particular focusing on the people that are being particularly toxic to Contra.
Okay, so with context, like the stream, it's hard to come by, but I have a download of the stream. I can send it to you if you want to watch the entire context of it. He was specifically talking about people that were viciously attacking ContraPoints, even some people that were trying to dox her friends and attacking her friends on YouTube and in real life. But regardless, you asked if calling them like dejected, degenerate, like queer people in their mom's basements. If you disagree with that characterization, I guess you can. He was making a descriptive claim about these people, especially when it came to the mental illness comment that a lot of these people are like extremely young. All they do is sit on Twitter all day and attack like leftist figures and in bad faith and bully them. I don't necessarily agree with you with like the framing of it, the way that you framed it. And I guess there's no way that I can really justify it if you haven't seen the context, because you seem to be of the opinion that he was talking about like just
Okay,
trans people who are criticizing.
I'll link the whole stream onto my. I can send you the whole stream if you want.
Okay,
But
if you have
I
it,
actually,
yeah, I have it.
yeah, I mean, I watched it, but like to me, when I watched the whole stream, I still don't think that's a valid argument because in that specific 30-second clip, if you take it out of the entire thing, he says, the people who want to cancel Contra are dejected,
I know
degenerate queer folks.
if you take
And
something
so
out of
even if you
context, it says something different. That's usually how taking things out of context works.
Okay, hold on. But that doesn't the context, broadly speaking, doesn't contradict the assertion made that the people who want to cancel Contra are dejected, degenerate queer folks. It's sort of like when Candace Owens said, Hitler did good things, but he shouldn't have expanded beyond Germany. And then when people confronted her, she said, watch the whole 2-hour session. To me, if you look at the specific, if you isolate the specific 30 seconds portion of what he said from the broader 2-hour live stream, it still doesn't contradict the fundamental assertion being made that he's calling people who want to cancel Contra degenerate queer folks. But
he is explicitly, when you watch the stream, he's explicitly referring to those people. I'm sorry that like when he said it, instead of people who want to cancel ContraPoints, he didn't instead say those people that are sitting in there like sitting around and they're attacking ContraPoints and they're doxing her friend, like specifically reiterating these are the people he's talking about.
Necessary.
Well, that's what the point of taking things out of. So that's the problem, though. That's the point of taking things out of context. You take things out of context. You don't know the issue that's being talked about, and you don't know the specifics of the discussion. And so you look at the clip out of context, and you think they're talking about something else. It's very easy to make a false argument when you take something out of context.
I said earlier that even if we were operating under the assumption that he was referring to those people specifically, I still think the way he framed that language and rhetoric is problematic. And I do think that he should have just said, the people who want to dox Contra and ruin her life are fucking pieces of shit or something. She didn't have to say they're dejected, degenerate queer people. I just don't think that's the proper framing and language. And he shouldn't have said, obviously in context you could argue that that's not the gist of what she's saying, but I think that language and rhetoric and understanding the nuances of language and being careful with the way we rhetorically assert something. I think that's really essential for leftists to do. And
Okay, I
also,
really quick. Can I stop you really quick because I want to be able to respond to each thing really fast. Do you mind?
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So for starters, saying that he should be more careful, I completely agree with that, and Vosh agrees with that. He's gone back and said that the way that stream's embarrassing for him because he doesn't feel like he was able to get his message across in the way that he wanted to, and there were a lot of clips in there from that stream that were easy to clip chimp out of context to mischaracterize his positions. As a public figure, you do have some responsibility to be very careful to make sure you don't say anything that can be easily taken out of context to fuck you over or spread false narratives about you. So I completely agree with that.
Problem. He
and Vosh would
apologizes.
as would. However,
he apologizes and then he keeps doing it again. Just recently, he said, "I'm becoming transphobic because of Blair White."
Okay, so that is a joke. So the argument,
was a joke. That's
yes,
the
it
point.
was.
I don't think
when he said that the people who are attacking ContraPoints, and when I refer to attacking her, I'm talking about viciously, reveling in her misery and being an alcoholic and her health issues and whatnot, or mental health issues and whatnot. When he refers to those people as basement-dwelling degenerates, he's not joking about that. He means that, and I would probably agree with that sentiment. But when he says that Blair White's so stupid it's making him transphobic, that is very obviously a joke, considering that most of his platform is dedicated to defending trans people.
That's the purpose of our conversation, to ascertain whether or not it's justified to joke in a fashion that could be alienating. And I feel like Vosh saying, I'm becoming transphobic because of Blair White, and then subsequently proceeding to say it's a joke, I'm kidding, which he did do that. I think that's problematic. That's the perspective I'm operating under in this debate.
Do you have any reasoning for that? Does that harm?
Yeah.
Did it seem like trans people that watch him as massively majority trans people community seem to have an issue with that? Or do you think they find it endearing?
Well, we can't just... Okay, so 2 points to make. I don't think we can just operate under his audience specifically. You also have to look at how the broader left trans community would react to that particular statement. And I do think that there's an innate problem with saying I'm becoming transphobic because of X. So you can make the assertion that Blair White sucks. Blair White is terrible. Saying I'm becoming transphobic because of this really shitty trans person, that's a very slippery slope. And it sort of enables rhetoric that could have some serious implications in a more broader context.
Okay. I'm going to quote Vosh on this. When you make an edgy joke or something like that, oh, Blair White's so stupid she's making me transphobic, something like that. Or Vosh, the example he used was, oh, fucking femoids, they don't know how to do math. When he makes a joke like that, he's very careful to never make an argument in favor of the thing that he is parroting. You never want to make an argument for those horrible ideas. Instead, you want to state that argument in a way that is so hyperbolized and ridiculous that it sounds even dumber than someone who actually believes that could present it, in a way that anyone with more than 2 brain cells who heard that would be able to know, oh wow, that's really fucking stupid. Of course women can do math. Oh, of course Blair White being stupid doesn't justify transphobia. And when you look at Vosh's, obviously, if you look at Vosh's overall platform and his history and his resume, you know he's not transphobic. I don't see that as being a valid attack towards Vosh.
So I agree with your assertion that it's not equivalent to making an argument, because he was bringing this up to attack someone who is oftentimes transphobic, or at least true scum like Blair White.
Oh, Blair White's transphobic. She hates non-binary people. Non-binary people are trans. She's transphobic.
Yeah, I'd agree with your assertion. But the point is, I feel as though even if that's valid, I think that we need to craft the fundamental disagreement we have in this debate is that I think we need to craft language in a way where we can make our assertions without being too alienating. And I feel as though because language is so critical to some people, and the way we frame language is so critical to some people, they don't appreciate it when you say something like, I'm becoming transphobic because of Blair White, or something to that level, or, femoids can't do math. I feel like that kind of framing is alienating to certain contingents of the left that are part of the marginalized communities. But you're right that he's not arguing in favor of them. Most of what Vosh does is productive, it's beneficial to these communities, but at the same time, it can also be a detriment to frame assertion in a particular way.
Okay, so the problem, if I was to sort of summarize your argument and get a Cliff Notes version of it, would be that the dirtbag left engages in rhetoric and in actions that can be alienating to certain marginalized people within the left. The problem that I have with that, though, is that I don't...
That's not quite.
Not
That's
quite.
half of
Okay.
my
Oh yeah.
that's half of my criticism. My criticism is that the dirtbag left engages in language and rhetoric that could be alienating to the left, and then they proceed to try to disregard critique of the dirtbag left by using terms like woke scold or wokelet to try to dismiss legitimate critiques and grievances against the language and rhetoric that's being used.
Okay, so I disagree with that. Whenever I see people calling someone like a woke scold or a wokelet, at least in Vosh's community, Vosh himself, and my community, and me as well, it's usually people who act in bad faith and use a veneer of wokeness to concern troll leftist figures. So, for example, I assume you saw my video about Social Justice Demon is an abusive piece of shit, attacks breadtubers and leftists because they know that leftists and breadtubers care about trans people. So if you want to try to abuse them and emotionally harm them, you call them transphobic because that's where it'll hit them because they aren't transphobic.
What's your
that would hurt them.
basis? What's your basis for making that assertion? Like, are you in Auntie Demon's head? Do you think he's operating
no, you can
under
never.
that?
No, you can never know what's going on in someone's head. You have to inductively reason their positions and their beliefs based on their actions and their rhetoric. So social justice demon. Okay.
How can you inductively make the assertion that he's doing this because he knows that you guys care about trans people
Sure.
and trying to get in your head?
Absolutely, sure. So social justice demon, as I assume you know, because I guess you were friends with them at some point, was sexually abused when they were very young, unfortunately, and they are now, as they've grown, and they dealt with abuse and all that while they were growing up, and now that they're older, they are housebound and not able to leave their home because of disabilities, and they've got a lot of issues, right? And when you look at their actions are clearly very abusive. People who have been abused in the past have been shown to typically grow up to be
How have
abusers.
their actions been abusive? How specifically have their actions been abusive?
I don't know.
I mean, I saw your video. I just
I mean, if you saw my video and you don't believe that as social justice demon is abusive, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, they literally when Patricia came out as trans, they went to their video that they made about Patricia Taxon and changed the thumbnail to a new thumbnail, which was a censored nude of Patricia Taxon before she had transitioned. True. That's true.
Actually.
No, that's
SJD
completely true.
Posted that picture. No, that's not true. SJD posted the picture of the pre-transition back when that was one of the only pictures that even existed of that person. It wasn't because he was trying to, abuse them. It was because that was pre-transition, if I'm not mistaken.
You're wrong right now. Hold on, let me bring it up on my end. So if you go to Social Justice Demons, YouTube right now, they've changed the thumbnail of the video. Oh no, they didn't. Never mind. They brought it back. So, this thumbnail. Scroll up a little bit. This thumbnail of Patricia Taxon, without the shirt on. This was a thumbnail. This thumbnail is an image that came from I think it was Peter Coffin video when they did like a collab. But Patricia Taxon appeared. This was like before she came out as trans or anything. Appeared shirtless for like a Jack Saint video. Appeared in a Jack Saint video for like a sketch, and this was the thing. However, after Patricia Taxon came out as trans, Social Justice Demon went back to this video and changed the thumbnail to a censored picture of a censored nude picture of Patricia Taxon before she came out as trans, with like an image of Rags, a YouTuber that Patricia made a video on, his face over Patricia's bits.
Well, the chronology of the Taxon thumbnail is like wrong because like the thumbnail. Okay, so first of all, it's kind of immaterial to the broader point that's being made. But like,
no, it's not immaterial. The point that I'm making is that Social Justice Demon is an abusive person. I have many examples. This is one of many. Okay, so
about Patricia Taxton, that picture that was posted on the thumbnail was prior to the transition, and that was prior to everything happening. That video was posted before that transition happened. So it wasn't
the video was made before the transition, and the original thumbnail was made before the transition, and then Patricia Taxon came out as trans, and after Patricia Taxon came out as trans, Social Justice Demon went back and changed the thumbnail to the one that we have an issue with, where it's a nude picture of Patricia Taxon that's censored from before she had transitioned. She did that, or no, they did that. Sorry, they did that retroactively after Patricia Taxon came out as trans.
Oh, damn! I actually didn't know that. That's an interesting point. I'd have to concede then, because
I see that as an abusive behavior. That's fine.
That's
fair,
fine.
Yeah. But I see that as abusive behavior personally. And there's a big list of things as well. The lying is also a big one. Social Justice Demon. If you watch my video, I feel I did a pretty good job of demonstrating multiple scenarios of them lying about me. And that's what these people do. The people that we're talking about here are abusive, particularly Social Justice Demon. So the argument that I made, if we go all the way back to where we started, was Social Justice Demon is an abusive person. People who've been abused, or most abusive people were usually abused in their childhood, and we know that Social Justice Demon has a history of having been sexually abused throughout their life, and they direct that abuse towards people on the left, mostly leftists, who they know will be harmed by it. This is something that abusers do. So I grew up having a very abusive mom, like emotionally and physically. And something my mom would do would be to, despite the fact she knew I wasn't any of these things, she would call me things that she knew would hurt me, saying that I was like a misogynist when I wasn't a misogynist, right? Not at least not until I became like a reactionary. This is something that abusers do. They try to hit you where it hurts. Then when you go after them, when you retaliate for it, they play the victim, which we also see Social Justice Demon doing. When I call them out, or anyone calls them out, they say, "Oh, I'm just a housebound, crippled trans person, and why would you attack me? You're transphobic."
All right. I mean, that's fair. Like, clearly I've demonstrated that I don't know enough about this situation, so
that's all right.
I probably shouldn't make any more assertions about it.
No, that's completely okay. I can't expect everybody to like know about this kind of shit. Like, specifically, the only reason I know this shit is because I did a bunch of research in preparation for like talking about Social Justice Demon. Is I wouldn't like expect you just to know this off the top of your head. Like, I had to dig like all night to get all this.
All right, fair enough. So what point did we leave off on before the Social Demon tangent?
Chud Logic, do you remember? Because you're the moderator. You can like redirect us back to where we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've gone off on quite a tangent there, haven't we? I think we were talking about sort of woke scolds and retiring the term and abusive behavior.
Okay, yeah, exactly. That's right. The term woke scold or wokelet is a term that I use, and most people in me and Vash's communities typically use towards people like Social Justice Demon who are abusive and want to hit people and want to abuse someone, so they hit where it hurts. There's a reason why these people never attack people on the right. Calling a conservative person, like let's say Social Justice Demon makes a tweet tomorrow calling some like smaller conservative YouTuber transphobic, they'd be like, yeah, but if they call a leftist YouTuber transphobic, they'll take offense to that because leftist figures generally aren't transphobic. They care about trans people. That is a place that an abuser can try to like aim to emotionally harm them. That's why you never see these people attacking right-wing figures. They all have anti-Breadtube in their bio. When you scroll down their tweets and replies, it's nothing but attacking people on the left. It's nothing but attacking Peter Coffin, nothing but attacking Vosh, nothing but attacking me. It's a sea of it. They never go after Ian Miles Chong. You never see it.
Okay, so I would agree that certain contingents of the anti-Breadtube crowd should go after Ian Miles Chung and some of the more reactionary people. But to make two statements, I think the term woke scold, obviously you agree that it has some problematic origins.
Yeah,
like
I completely agree with people who take issue with the origin of the word. I don't like the word at all. That's why I'm trying to sort of like move to wokelet or woke scum, because that's like an original
But
thing.
Don't you think the term wokelet or woke scum is going to be a slippery slope, and it's going to start being used against people that simply have opposing viewpoints towards like the dirtbag left, or like
I
critique rhetoric and language, and it's going to be like thrown around in a
yeah,
problematic sort of way,
yeah, the way
because
that
it is kind of a dismissive term, don't you think?
Sure, depending on how it's being used. The problem with language is an art, so that's not an argument against making that word prevalent. The way that language works is any group or any person can appropriate that word for any purpose. They can use it to be dismissive. They can use it against people with good intentions. That's always a possibility when we talk about language. I don't see that as a valid reason not to use the word though, or to make that word
Okay,
become like a prevalent thing.
so I think that the slippery slope fallacy obviously is a real fallacy that exists, but I feel as though with the term wokelet in particular, you're essentially dismissing a person's view, essentially effectively canceling in the sense that you invalidate their argument and suggest that they're woke scolds or they're wokelets or they're woke whatever derivative you want to use. The point
I
is that
mean,
it's sort of like a form of like downplaying other assertions that they might make and making dialogue more limited in its parameters and sort of like reducing it down and boiling it down to that term. Like you
okay.
don't take them seriously. Like you essentially invalidate the assertions they're making.
Well, no, they invalidate themselves. Or when I say invalidate themselves, I'm talking about their arguments, not their identities. A lot of them are trans for some reason, but just want to clarify that because I don't want. Listen, a lot of people are going to try to clip me out of context to do dumb shit on Twitter. A lot of them end up invalidating their own arguments because what they say is so demonstrably untrue that you can just quote tweet it and just like put a fucking like Pepe looking unamused face, and everybody who sees that will look at it and be like, oh wow, this person's a fucking dumbass woke school because what they've said is so ridiculous.
But
It's not a way of dismissing their arguments. It's a way of characterizing their views or a label in the sense, when we see a conservative who says shitty stuff about trans people, we call him a chud or a reactionary because that is an apt label for them. It's not a way of dismissing their beliefs. We dismiss their beliefs by arguing them and debunking them. We do the
okay,
same thing with the woke schools. It's just a characterization, or not a. It's just a label for them.
but if you're going to call people that are ostensibly on the left wokelets or woke scolds or woke whatever derivative you want to use, isn't that a significantly bigger slippery slope than the most slippery slopes you're going to appear with language and rhetoric? Like you're clearly opening the doorway to that word being used, thrown around like in the most I'd say misleading way possible. So I feel like even if you could argue that that's not a valid criticism, it's still valid in the sense that there's better ways to confront these people than to use terms like woke scold or wokelet, where it feels as though you're reducing it down. And I feel as though with right wingers, perhaps there's a greater justification for using that kind of language than with people that are ostensibly on the left.
Why?
Because you want to expand like the left, and you want to assume that perhaps there's an ability for them to reconcile their issues with you, and you want to try to operate in good faith, right?
I don't think that was a response to what I just asked. When I said why, I was referring to why is it okay to call conservatives chuds, but it's not okay to call like conservatives who act in bad faith and say terrible shit chuds, but it's not okay to call a person on the left who acts in bad faith and lies and attacks leftist figures woke scolds.
So, okay, let's assume that we're operating under the assumption that that's how the word is used, because like essence of thought, for example, you think that person's a woke school?
Oh, absolutely. Beyond that, essence of thought is a bad person in general. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Essence of Thought literally has a video scheduled that is called Xander Hall is the worst kind of transphobe. And in their like in the comments, they hold on, let me actually bring it up. I offered to debate. I actually reached out to them and was like, listen, I will gladly debate you so I can defend myself in real time. If you feel uncomfortable doing it in a like on my platform or on your platform, we can get like a moderator. I'll let you choose. We can have set out topics and everything. And their response was, why are we talking about this here? The show isn't for 5 days. It's not going to be a debate. We are not equals. Piggy is just a run-of-the-mill transphobe masquerading as more. Get that out there. So lying about me, calling me a transphobe, masquerading as being a progressive, and then telling their audience to spread that around. I don't know.
Doesn't lying imply intent though? Like if
Yeah.
you're
No,
doing this
absolutely.
on
Yeah, no. Essence of Thought is intentionally lying. Essence of Thought is a bad person.
what's your basis for saying they're intentionally doing it? Like, what? Maybe they just don't feel as though they're equipped to
They
debate.
have a history of being an abusive piece of shit. Like with the Rachel Oates thing, after they like ruthlessly attacked Rachel Oates, and Rachel Oates ended up self harming and cutting herself because of the stress. The next day, Essence of Thought's response was to post a video on their Twitter or a article on their Twitter called "How White Women Use Their Tears to Silence Minorities." That was their response to Rachel Oates cutting themselves because of the stress and the harassment they were getting.
Oh God, yeah. I probably like every time I try to jump in to defend somebody, I realize I don't have enough. Like I learned these new things, and
Yeah, I mean,
I
so
suddenly
when I
realize
call someone a woke scold, I know there's people who may use that term incorrectly, but I'm not those people. I'm not defending the people who do that, and we can argue against those people. I mean, there's plenty of people who use it incorrectly. Ben Shapiro, for example, and I argue against Ben Shapiro all the time. The problem is. When people like me or in Vosh's community call someone a woke scold, they're usually doing something around those lines. Usually they're lying, they're attempting to make personal attacks towards that person. Those same people usually have a history of doing things like that. Lying about people, trying to spread misinformation, being abusive, these types of things. They usually have a history of doing that. It's not a pejorative that's being used to dismiss their opinions. It's just an apt label for it. So when you for example, if someone in my chat comes in and says some weird like some really racist shit, and my chat's like, what the fuck was that? I'll be like, yeah, no, it's a chud. That's basically the leftist version. So if someone comes in and says Xander Hall's a transphobic piece of shit, he hates trans people, and be like, what the fuck was that? I'd be like, it was a woke scold, you know.
But I don't think that necessarily sums up woke. So like you could genuinely think that Xander Hall's a I don't think so. Obviously, if we look at it objectively, you're not transphobic. But like, I could see why someone would make that critique and not be a woke school. They could be an honest actor who just thinks you're a transphobic piece of shit. Like
the problem, and that's fine. If somebody, so I will absolutely, and this is something that I want. I love doing this. All right, if somebody genuinely thinks I'm transphobic, and they come to me and they're like, "You're transphobic," and they argue, and I'll usually argue with them on Twitter. I'll be like, I mean, I usually don't, unless they start out by being like really aggressive. Like I'll have people come into my thread and be like, "You're a transphobic piece of shit. You're a pathetic piece of shit." If they come into my like Twitter and they say things like that, I'm obviously not going to give them like a very nice response. But if they just come in and say, I think you're kind of transphobic, and they want to argue with me about that, and they, especially if they want to come on in debate, I will gladly do that. But what I'm talking about are people who just, without any evidence whatsoever, accuse me of being transphobic and then try to spread that around. People like Danny Quarks, people like Social Justice Demon and Essence of Thought, Jamie, the chick that called Peter Coffin, or accused Peter Coffin of having groomed his girlfriend when she was underage, or his wife when she was underage. Like, these people are insane with what they do. It's crazy.
Okay, so to interject, I mean, they don't just say you're transphobic. They bring up the fact that you make dead naming jokes. Like, you say that if people call you pig puncher, you're dead naming. They think that's a transphobic statement. And while I don't
so
think
for starters, they
transphobic,
characterize it as me being serious when I say that, when it's very, very blatantly like joking.
Well,
and even when I say that I'm joking, my fans come in and say it's a joke. Trans people in Xander Hall's community made that joke because they want to have a trans joke involving Xander Hall. I mean, this has already been explained like plenty. But people were unironically saying that I actually believe that calling me pig puncher is the equivalent of dead naming a trans person.
Don't you think don't you think that kind of joke is kind of counterproductive? Don't you think that kind of joke might not be helpful to the trans community to like
No.
say?
No, as a matter of fact,
naming?
I've actually seen more arguments to say that it actually helps the trans community. The majority of people, even within like progressive spaces, didn't know what the word dead naming what dead naming was. I didn't know what dead naming was until a few weeks ago even. I think that popularizing the term, making it a bit more mainstream and getting it out there and giving like a more relatable example of it through humor is probably a very good thing.
Don't you think you're taking away the significance and weight of people that are actually dead named? Saying somebody's previous past name, don't you think you're taking away the weight and significance and levity of doing that by saying you're jokingly saying you're dead naming somebody because you're referring to their old channel name? Like, don't you think
I
that's
mean, I'm not.
like
So the thing is, I'm not trans. I don't know what it's like to be dead named, but I imagine it sucks. There's a lot of trans people in my community. They're the ones that made the joke. If they don't feel that way and they like it when I make the joke and they see it as a way to like bond with me, sort of, that was a justification I saw from a lot of people in my on my Twitters. Like a lot of trans people who are making the joke, saying that it was like a way for them to sort of like bond with me or to relate with me or something. If they see that as being like a positive, then I don't see an issue with it. I've yet to see a tangible harm that is done by me making the pig puncher's a dead name joke.
okay, but like even if like parts of your like people that are part of your trans community might have like started that whole joke and everything, don't you think that perhaps the way you utilize that kind of humor could sort of undermine the experiences of some trans people who've been dead named or like who've had those experiences? Don't you think that it could perhaps be like counter, I won't say counterintuitive, but like counterproductive, like perhaps not beneficial?
Sure, the problem is it doesn't matter what you do. Someone is always going to be, and I know this is like a right wing meme, but someone is always going to be offended by something that you say and do. No one can be perfect and perfectly PC and never offend anybody. I could literally refrain from using any term that could be considered ableist. I had people saying that when I say someone has brain worms, that's ableist, right? Like even if I refuse from calling anyone stupid or dumb or having brain worms, if I were to cleanse my vocabulary of all even somewhat problematic language, there are people who'd still take issue with that.
Okay, but I'd argue that there's obviously like a line to be drawn, but I mean,
But
can't you
where's
say
that line? We
that?
have to determine where that line is.
I think the line is like something like stupid and dumb is reasonable, but the term retarded, for example, has some serious connotations. Like it's a serious mental health issue that people deal with, not having not having sufficient cognitive capacity to
Mm-hmm.
behave in a
No,
particular
I
way.
agree with that.
So
I've
like,
stopped saying the word retarded, not because I think it's like offensive or anything, but because I don't like saying it. I have my own personal reasons for cutting down on it. But that's the thing, though. You're okay with stupid and dumb being said, but stupid and dumb still have ableist intent, not intentions, ableist pasts, ableist histories. There are people who will take issue and do with using dumb and stupid. Um,
so I just look at it from like a consequence. I'm just drawing the line. The line is obviously being drawn on a partially arbitrary basis, but like from a consequentialist perspective, I just see more damage with the term like the R word than like stupid or dumb. That's the reason I'm not looking at this from a principle level, more of just from a consequentialist face value way. That's the
Well,
reason I'm
well, that's
drawing the lines
the thing is if
around the
we're
R word. Or
well, depending on what your intentions are, if we were looking at it completely consequentialist, you would be okay with using the term retarded because if the use of the term retarded by a leftist figure probably makes the left way more appealing to like people in the center and a little bit to the right than
but it alienates
rephrasing
people
from
that are
doing
in the
so.
left.
Yeah, but
You don't think the term?
okay, even if we alienate people that are already in the left, do you think they're gonna leave the left because there's like a
But it
dirtbag leftist figure that says retarded sometimes? I
no, but
really
there I agree with you, but there'd be more divided factions, and that wouldn't be conducive to the sort of environment we want to win the so-called internet culture wars or whatever like whatever you want to bring up. Like it could be the way we form a government. It could be anything. We don't want fractures or divisions within a particular
the
movement.
left. This is. I'm sorry, but the left will never be completely united. As a matter of fact, historically, it is a meme that the left is always fighting itself. The authoritarian leftists are always fighting with the anarchist leftists. It's literally a fucking meme. The left can't get along.
I'd
That the
agree.
right falls
I'd
in line,
agree.
but the left is always infighting. It will never be stopped. We can try our best to encourage as much leftist unity as possible, but left unity as a whole, like overwhelmingly, is never going to occur. The best we can do is try to bring as many people into the left as possible, so that the left is just so big that even fractured, it can succeed.
I agree with you that the left won't be totally unified, but we should try when we can't find a lane or an outlet to mitigate that sort of divisions that exist because obviously the right has more effectively unified behind a banner, and it enables them to achieve more political successes. So even if I were like, I acknowledge that it's a meme that anarchists and Leninists and all these various ideological schools of thoughts have been clashing for a long time. I do think that when we can, we should try to unify the left as best way as possible. Find a lane to unify the left as best as possible.
Yeah, I
if
mean,
we can.
that's what I try. I do try to do that. I advocate for leftist unity. Obviously, not tankies and class reductionists and whatnot. Those guys are pretty shitty. I don't think I want people who like class reductionists especially. They don't give a fuck about marginalized groups in America. They don't care about trans people or people of color or women or anything. They just care about class. Like people like that, I don't know if I want to unite with. I feel there's probably more efficacy, more to gain if we bring people in the center and to the right into the left to more like libertarian leftist ideas. You know, like ideally, if the world was just a little more into market socialism, the amount of change that would cause would be so significant, and that is my goal, trying to give people class consciousness and make them more accepting of certain marginalized groups, particularly trans people.
Okay, that I can agree with you that class reductionists and people who have more sort of regressive societal and social perspectives, I do agree with you that left unity shouldn't be extended, an olive arm shouldn't be extended to those variants of people. So again, it's more of a relative, like, consequentialist lens we're looking at this, and I think that your perspective is that uh, from a consequential level, it's better for the left to get more people if it divides, even if it alienates to a certain degree. I think that's your perspective, right?
So the idea is that a rising tide raises all boats. I know this is an argument usually used to argue against people who say, "Oh, but if we give poor people more and make them more successful, that makes us less successful." But it's in the sense that if we make the left bigger, these fractured factions of the left get bigger as well, and they get stronger. And even if we don't have left unity, the left will still be so large that it'll be able to succeed in most practical issues.
Yeah, see, I don't know if that's true. I don't think being too fractured would benefit the left.
Well, the left is going to be fractured no matter what. Even if we advocate for leftist unity constantly, the left is always going to be fractured. You're going to have like the Nazguls and class reductionists on stupid poll that are going to be shit talk, like calling anybody who cares about trans people on the left radlibs. That's always going to be a thing. There's always going to be that. There's always going to be tankies that call anybody who isn't a tanky radlibs and not real socialists. This is always going to be a thing. The left is notorious for this. Way more influential and way smarter people than you, me, Vosh, any Breadtuber alive right now have tried to unite the left and have written about this, and it is just not doable. The left and the way that it is formatted, the way that the left works, is just incapable of being completely unified. It will always be fractured. The best we can do is grow the left as much as possible so we can win.
Of course, the left isn't as ideologically rigid as the right, so there's going to be more divisions. But I'd argue that, like I said, I just don't think it needs to be exacerbated if it's pointlessly exacerbated. I think that divisions will exist and sometimes they're healthy, but they shouldn't be like overdone, and they shouldn't be done in a fashion that isn't necessary. That's what I'd say.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty necessary to grow the left. Leftist fracturing has always been a thing, and it's always going to happen, but I mean, I don't know where we can go from there. We just disagree on that fundamentally. I wanted to go back really quick because I know I can't possibly have data to support the idea that my rhetoric and what I do is bringing a significant amount of people from the center and to the right and to the left. All I can say is, from my personal experience, I do have some numbers on it, I guess, technically. My video about how I got out of the alt-right rabbit hole and like my story has 194,000 views right now after 2 months. Basically every comment is like, holy shit, the same thing happened for me. Oh my god, we have the same story. The same thing happened for me. It seems like, and then I get emails constantly saying that my content has like helped de-radicalize people from the right. Like, this just seems like there's this massive trend of people being pulled to the right by sort of the edgy meme humor that these right-wing demagogues engage in. I mean, watch a PJW video. He's like filling it up with like the Zoomer shitlord memes, right? They know what they're doing. When the left does it, it's successful as well. And I get comments from people all the time telling me that if it weren't for people like me and Vosh, they would still be transphobic reactionaries right now. Not only that, but I've had trans people come to me and say this, and say that because of the reactionary content that they saw, And
Okay.
even okay, sorry, we can. I'll let you speak. I don't want to gish gallop you.
No, it's fine. Just to briefly interject. So, don't you think you could still have that sort of brash, like, oh my god, this person is a fucking moron, that kind of style? You can emulate that style while not using the term triggered or, alluding to people's mental health issues oftentimes, which you do, right? Like, I'm not trying to straw man or anything.
Well,
Do you
it's
think
usually never a way to just to like impugn them morally, but usually like so for example with social justice demon, the reason why I point out their mental health issues is because it's relevant to their actions and why they're doing what they're doing. They have a history of abuse. They have an abusive personality, and it affects their actions, and it's why they're doing what they're doing. It's relevant to the discussion. I don't just say,
so?
"Oh, this person is fucking crazy," and then write them off.
So if they do have this serious health issue, why do you think it's productive to call them like a wokelet or a woke scold or whatever term you want to use?
Because a mentally ill wokelet is still a wokelet.
But don't you think that would exacerbate their like mental health situation? Because
I mean, I don't necessarily agree that like fighting back against abuse from someone who is mentally ill is a bad thing because it might exacerbate their condition.
okay, so you think that they're abusing you to the degree where you feel as though it's justified to call them a wokelet or a woke scold?
Yeah.
Okay, that's I yeah, I was curious, but like again, I don't want to like veer too much into that direction because I need to know more about this.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
I generally agree if they're like going after me and they're like an abuser and they're using a facade of wokeness as an excuse to launch abusive claims towards me, then yes, I feel like I am justified in calling them a wokelet. I don't know. I guess we
okay.
disagree there, but
So
yeah.
so you've dem like this is more like out of curiosity, but like you've demonstrated how they've been abusive to people, but how specifically have they been abusive to you?
I mean, we've already talked about some of this, like Essence of Thought as an example. Do you want to talk about Social Justice Demon? Like, who
Yeah, I was
specifically?
referring to social justice
Okay, yeah.
demon. Yeah, I was
Social. So Justice Demon specifically as a matter of fact, I have it pinned or not pinned, but in one of my announcement things. Let's check this out. You can decide whether or not this is abusive. Maybe by your standards this isn't abusive, but I'll let you decide that. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. It's a Twitter thread from Social Justice Demon and Danny Corks, who is a cringe Zionist. Let's read it. So I basically made a tweet defending Vosh, and they responded, "Cool story, still racist. By the way, Xander Hall TV is Pig Puncher's rebranded Twitter account that he made because someone, then in quotes, I'm sure I don't know who, kept reporting his other accounts and getting them banned. I'm sure this one is entirely safe and isn't about to fall victim to the same tragic fate than a smiling like Halo emoji. Yeah, I don't know. That's a little yikesy. And that's like just the start of it. I mean, that was like my first interaction with Social Justice Demon. We can go down the list of shit they pulled. We can go down the list of shit that all these woke skull types have pulled that's like abusive or shitty. It's a
so
pretty long
let's
list.
just so assuming that's true, like you mentioned that she's been through a lot of like terrible things, which leads her to behave this way. So
Sorry, I don't like misgendering on accident. I assume it wasn't
no,
intentional.
did
But
I say she?
yeah, you did answer. I understand that
Oh
because
my
I
god.
accidentally did it a few
I'm
times.
sorry, I didn't mean
They
to
have a female
sexually assault.
avatar like in their thing, so it's a meme. Yeah, I understand.
No, that's
Sorry.
that. I should say he. That's really
I
bad. I shouldn't do that.
for non-binary
Um,
people, really quick, for non-binary people, I usually default to they them, even if they're okay with he or she, because gender is, especially with non-binary people, can be fluid, and I don't want, like, if I make a video about a non-binary person or referencing a non-binary person, I don't want to call them he him when they're okay with those pronouns at that point. But then let's say 5 years in the future, they're only okay with they them, or they're using different pronouns, and now my video is outdated and is misgendering them. If you just default to they them, you're never misgendering somebody because it'll always be grammatically correct, even if you're referring to cis people or binary trans
okay.
people.
But I think they tweeted like that they feel uncomfortable with you calling them they, but I might be wrong about that.
I haven't
But
seen that. I would be surprised if that was the
that's fair.
case. Anyone who would say that they're uncomfortable being referred to as they is a little weird. I guess there's a possibility, like for a binary trans person, if they're like, I feel euphoria from being called whatever their preferred pronoun is. I guess that's a thing. But they're literally an NB who has they/he in their bio, I believe, so I don't think they take issue with they.
I think it's he/him that's on the bio, but you're right. That's we could verify that later. But the point I was gonna make is that like, do you really think that sort of behavior constitutes? I was gonna ask if that constitutes abuse, but I feel like that would just go down in this rabbit hole where
I
because
mean,
I already agree.
that's like the least harmful thing they did. I mean, they've been stalking my old Twitter accounts, getting them banned. I think like incessantly trying to get like leftist figures banned and deplatformed is probably kind of abusive. And then like going on to what they did, like lying about me and encouraging their they even encouraged their viewers. I don't know if you consider this abusive, but I showed the tweet on stream where they said Xander Hall is going to do a harassment stream on me. Hey guys, you better go ahead and take a look at YouTube's policy on harassment with like a little winky face. Basically very slyly suggesting to their followers that they should report my stream to try to get my YouTube banned.
Yes, the reason I don't want to go down this rabbit hole is because I don't support deplatforming and like mass. So like it would just be a like some literal like I don't know debate about what constitutes abuse. So like I don't feel like that rabbit hole would be productive to this conversation. But yeah, I totally lost my train of thought. Yeah.
Chud Logic, do you want to like bring it back around if?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think we were talking about obviously just Steam. We went off on that tangent again. Maybe we should stay away from some of the drama type stuff that's we've been discussing.
Hey man, it's still relevant. It's content, so I don't know.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Don't get me wrong, but we seem to have gone down that route twice. But in any case, yeah, maybe if we sort of bring it back to the Dirtbag left. I mean, is there anything in particular, Zoomer Nation, that hasn't been covered that you would want to cover?
Oh yeah, sure. So let's go to. So basically, I don't agree with this sort of visceral reaction of the whole attacking like the whole anti-Breadtube community. I don't think that's necessarily productive because I think there's very legitimate criticisms of Breadtube, more broadly speaking.
Okay, well we're not attacking them; they're attacking us, and we're like sort of retaliating or defending ourselves generally. I mean, if they make threads about how like Breadtube is nothing but a cabal of pedophiles and sexual assault defenders, and then they do things like call Vosh a rapist when the worst thing he did was like really kind of creep on a girl in Discord DMs 3 years ago. Like I don't know, I see that as pretty like trying to ruin someone's career by massively mischaracterizing, or I should say misframing a situation seems like an attack in itself. I don't think we're just like going out of our way to attack these people who are critical of us. They're genuinely trying to deplatform us and ruin our careers. They disagree with our existence.
Yeah, I don't agree with the whole deplatforming thing, but I feel like it's a bit more nuanced. Like than the whole cabal of pedophiles thing. Is that something they literally said?
No, absolutely. Social justice demons specifically. I don't want to get into specifics because Chet Logic doesn't want to, but yeah, generally, the big go-to argument for a lot of them is that Breadtube is consists of either pedophiles and rapists or defenders of pedophiles and rapists.
I think it definitely consists of.
It's more rape apologists is what they go to. The pedophile thing is more of a right-wing meme, but I've seen it from these types.
But do you think there's no validity to that claim that there's some people in the Breadtube community that have engaged in rape apologetics?
I mean, you can make that argument, but the claim that Breadtube is just, and this is what they say. They say that there was, it's in. I don't want to get too specific, but once again, Social Justice Demon, who's probably one of the biggest representations to these people, has the satanic Chris Hansen of the left have a seat Breadtube in their bio.
I mean, but like, isn't there validity to the claim that they should have handled certain rape apologetics, like rape?
Sure. Wait, if you want to criticize them with like good faith criticism, like I guess there's one being levied at Peter Coffin because one of their mods at some point like was accused of being a rapist. I've done research on this. I know there was like someone named Lorelei Bailey. I've done research on it. Everything that I can't find an unbiased account of what happened. Most of the things that came up when I searched it up were like Kiwi Farms threads that started with like unhinged T-slur rapes, blah blah blah. Like that's what would come up when I would search for this drama. So I feel like the well's too poisoned for me to like have an opinion on this. But if something genuinely happened there when this drama happened, there is criticism you can levy to defenders of that person when there was like a lot of accusations happening towards them. But to claim that Breadtube is just a cabal of like rapists and rape apologists is just really dishonest, and there's a clear sort of
I can
intention
understand
behind
why
that.
they make that argument because there's somebody who exposed or at least talked a lot about this rape apologetics called Comrade Cud, and this is someone you blocked on Twitter.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
Comrade Cud is a piece of shit. I've dealt with them on Twitter. They in
Okay.
fact they actually said to me in oh fuck, I have a screenshot. Hold on, I got a screenshot from last night when I was in EOT's when I was in ENT's
But literally, Comrade Cud can't even post on Breadtube anymore. They removed all his stuff because he made a video talking about the whole Midnight Castle, the Vampire Castle stuff, and at Peter Coffin and all that drama shit, which we can move away from if you want, because I agree. I know Chud doesn't really want us to get into detail about this, but
I mean, I understand that. The issue that I have is when you bring up these specific examples, like, I don't know about this specific one, but the last two that you brought up, I've been able to pretty much prove that the person, like the woke skull, the wokelet involved was being abusive or lying or mischaracterizing things, like with the with Essence of Thought and with a social justice demon. So I don't know if that's like I don't know. We can move away from that if you want.
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't mind you bringing up individuals if it's particularly relevant to what's being discussed, but I don't want to divulge into big tangents speaking about specific people.
Okay.
As long as everyone's happy with that, of course.
That's fair. Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
if you don't, that's
you
fair.
go.
Like, if you don't know enough about this person, we can move to like a different.
Yeah, I don't
point
know.
of
So there is a difference, and I want to clarify this. There is a difference between good faith constructive criticism of Breadtube and the Dirtbag left, and bad faith abusive criticism, if you can even call it criticism, towards Breadtube and the Dirtbag left. Something that, for example, Social Justice Demon is an example of bad criticism. Luxander, who I believe is still watching, made a video on ContraPoints that was critiquing her and her platforming Buck Angel and some of her more problematic tweets, but it was a very well thought out constructive criticism. Hey, they are in the chat. It was a very thought out constructive criticism that was in good faith. And ContraPoints then went on to recommend the video to her audience in her video about canceling because it was a good constructive criticism, and then she apologized for the things that she did wrong. But there's a difference between that and then accusing ContraPoints of being a true scum who hates non-binary people, and then reveling in her being depressed and engaging in dangerous amounts of alcoholism. I mean, during her, I'm sub to her Patreon. During a lot of her Patreon streams, she's really drunk. She does have an alcohol problem. I don't want to this is sort of a known thing.
Okay, so I agree with you. Like, I'm not the massive like anti-ContraPoints person. I'd agree with you that people who want to like push her to this point where she feels abused or like forced to like become alcoholic or whatever, like that's terrible. And so yeah, that's fair. I mean, there are legitimate criticisms of ContraPoints, of course, regarding the whole Buck Angel thing, but yeah.
I made one too.
I'd agree.
I made a video too, and I was actually surprised at how well it did. I thought my audience would be mad at me for, criticizing the queen, but I made a video, where is it? I can actually scroll down to it and show it on stream just to like give a visual of this. It was called A Fair Constructive Criticism of ContraPoints, where I talk about a mix of basically everything that ContraPoints ended up admitting to in her video and apologizing for, where I partly gave some defense of ContraPoints and the people who were like really going after her for bad faith reasons, but also criticized her for things that she unquestionably did wrong, platforming Buck Angel being a big one of them, and what I perceive to be a gap in understanding between her and younger trans people in general.
Okay, so that's all that. Yeah, I do agree with all of that. But the reason why I brought up Comrade Cut and all that wasn't like because of the whole blocking thing. It was more to make a point about why, while it's unfair to say Breadtube is a cabal of pedophiles and everything, it is fair to say that there has been some sort of cancellation going on with the Breadtube, and there has been this attempt to defend content creators that have made mistakes, and I think that's problematic.
What do you mean
That's the reason I brought
cancellation within Breadtube? What do you mean?
it. Because like Comrade Cud can't post anything now. Like all his stuff has been removed. I'm banned from Breadtube, so but I
I mean,
uploaded to a
okay.
different Reddit account.
So I understand that. I don't know if I would call it canceling. I don't like the word canceling. I never say blah 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 canceled unless it's like quoting somebody or like
Have you ever heard of the actual Justice Warrior?
heard of it. Thank you, Rocket, for the $2. Yeah. So I from my experience with Comrade Cud, I think they're a bad faith actor. Because of the things they've said to me on Twitter, the insults and the claims they've levied towards me. I think they're a bad faith actor. If any of their content is even close to similar to as bad faith and as abusive as what they did on Twitter, then I am not surprised they're banned from the Breadtube subreddit.
I saw what he put on Twitter. It seemed pretty like obviously you agree insults aren't innately bad, right? It seemed as though
Well, I mean, it wasn't just the insults.
valid
If I was getting insulted, that would be one thing. But them calling me transphobic and a bigot, that's a whole nother story.
I think he'd argue that, like, you'd have to talk to him, but I think he'd probably point to the fact that you support the trans community, but he thinks that some of your actions are transphobic. But, like, I don't know the rationalization he'd use, so you'd have to talk to him. But have you, like, tried to DM him or, like, try to get to understand his position on why you're transphobic?
No, he blocked me after he sent me, like, a bunch of tweets calling me, like, a transphobic piece of shit.
Oh, really? I thought you blocked him. That's...
No, what I did was when I made my new Twitter account to try to avoid getting banned immediately was I went and I looked up my name to see people that were like talking shit about me, and I preemptively blocked them to make sure I don't get like mass reported until I could figure out who was getting my accounts banned. As I now know, it was Social Justice Demon. And then after that, now like as of like the last like month or so, I don't block people who just talk shit about me. I try to engage with them, Comrade Cud included, but Comrade Cud ended up blocking me if I recall correctly.
All right, that's fair. Really, the primary reason I brought that up is because I just have become very skeptical of Breadtube because, like, what I did, I made a video giving milquetoast critique of Vosh. I literally said in that video I appreciate what he does, and suddenly, like, one or two videos I make that are critical of Breadtube, suddenly I'm not allowed to post there anymore. So I just feel this sort of skepticism. I know Breadtube is like a largely decentralized thing. I know you can't say that just because some moderators on the Reddit for Breadtube are bad, that's not indicative of the whole community, but I've just grown a bit skeptical.
Wait, hold on. Comrade Cut, I didn't want to interrupt you, but really quick, I should probably correct myself. Comrade Cut is in my Twitch chat saying they've never sent tweets to me or blocked me. Am I thinking of someone else? I might be thinking of someone else who isn't Comrade Cut with like a similar name or something. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You know who I think I was thinking of? Comrade Cud, do you have like a green profile picture with like a bird on it?
Not a bird, it's green and like yellow.
Oh, I'm thinking of... No, I see the screenshot that I was thinking of. Never mind. I'm thinking of someone named a bird called Levi, not Comrade Cud. Yeah, I apologize. I should clarify. I don't think I've interacted with Comrade Cud before. I'm talking about this person here in this screenshot. I apologize. I misheard.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you should talk to him sometime. He's very informative. But yeah, hey, I don't know where to go with this convo. Do you have any additional points to make?
Yeah, so I understand where you're coming from here. I think when it comes to like people getting banned from the Breadtube subreddit, that's like a whole nother thing.
Yeah, right. We can never know for certain.
That's like specific mods, like maybe not liking you or your video and then banning you. Like that's not really Breadtube as a whole, or any of the creators.
That's
it's
fair.
Just
I just think the Reddit component of Breadtube is like so significant, and it's kind of a detriment to my channel that they totally banned me. Like it's kind of unfair, to be honest.
I was banned from posting on Breadtube when I first started out. They thought that my content was spam. Yeah, back when I had like 5,000 subs, they thought my content was spam, and they ended up.
Sorry, I don't normally interject to this degree, but I just want to say I was also banned from the Breadtube subreddit for posting my videos about Steven Crowder drinking dog cum on there.
Yep, yeah, I remember that too. Yeah, it's just the mods on there are kind of assholes at times. I mean, nowadays they're nice to me because I've got a bigger channel, but like for smaller Breadtubers, they might, if you make like if you make a lot of content they don't view to be high effort enough, they'll fucking yeet you off and ban you until your channel's big enough that you're relevant and someone decides to unban you. Oh, they
That's
just.
fair.
Oh,
Okay.
never mind. Comrade Cud says they weren't banned. They just removed one of their videos about red flag laws. Either way, the point still stands. The Breadtube subreddit does have some mods that might be a little crazy, and my roommates are yelling. I apologize.
It's all good. I think we were planning to have this to run for about an hour and a half, so we've got 10 minutes left. So I guess if anyone in
I
my
can make
chat,
closing statements. If
yeah,
you
do
want.
closing statements. If anyone's got in chat has got any questions for either person, throw them up. So go ahead.
Sounds good to me. At the end of the day, my goal is to do within my lifetime as much advocacy for the left as possible. I want as many people to join the left. I want as many people. I want the world to be significantly more class conscious, less transphobic, less racist, less sexist, everything down the line than it was when I was born. When I die eventually because of me and because of Breadtube and because of this movement that we're kind of doing. And I want the left to grow and I want to influence significant change. And that is my goal at the end of the day. My methods for doing so are to try to appeal to center-leaning people and people on the right with edgy humor and things that they might be able to relate to and find entertaining. And I understand some people may take issue with that. If their criticism of it is good faith, I will hear them out as I've done today. But if it's bad faith and abusive, then I will retaliate as you would expect. But yeah, it's basically my meme.
All right. So my closing statement would be that I just have a concern with language and rhetoric that's used by certain people that associate themselves with the dirtbag left, or some who don't. I think that being precise and clear with our language is essential to the left. I think that we need to bring more people in. I think that we need to build a coalition, of course. And I think that in the internet, we have disproportionately certain communities are represented. The white community obviously is disproportionately represented. Obviously, it's wonderful that there's more marginalized people in the Breadtube community in comparison to most others. But I think that we do need to be clear and cogent with our language. I think that we need to try to minimize the feeling of discomfort in the communities. And I also don't think leftist unity isn't something that should be scoffed at, meaning that we need to acknowledge that we can't have this ideal situation where every community, where every marginalized people can hold hands and sing kumbaya and there won't be disagreements, because there's a lot of intellectual disagreements about anarchism versus Marxism, about the function of the state, about what kind of language is appropriate and not. But I think that we should try to at least mitigate the situation as best as possible. And obviously we need to beat the chuds. I think we all agree that's the end goal. But yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, so we've got about 7 minutes. I've got one question here for you, Xander. So why does Xander think it's relevant to bring up people's mental health as a tactic to dismiss people? There are plenty of people with mental health who are stable, but just find things hard to cope with sometimes. Why would you entertain this just to be edgy?
I never do this. I never bring up somebody's mental health as a way to be edgy or to dismiss their beliefs. Whenever I bring up someone's mental health, it's usually really relevant to the situation. I know we argued about this earlier, so I assume the question is maybe a bit old. But specifically, when I talk about this, it's relevant. Like with Anti-Demon, they're the social justice demon person, their trauma and their mental state is relevant to their actions and why they're doing what they're doing. It's important to acknowledge that trauma can bring somebody, as they get older, to develop into certain mental states and have certain issues, and those issues can cause them to do pretty bad things, I would say. Most abusers were abused themselves growing up, and I think that's a relevant discussion to have. I'm not using it to dismiss them, but I think it's still relevant.
Okay.
I think it's healthier to just not bring up mental health when we're discussing figures. I think just substantively critiquing them is solution.
Okay, I've got a question here from Dylan Burns. So Dylan Burns asks, will Zoomer Nation fight me for the best Zoomer content creator? I propose a game of hopscotch.
Sure. I suck at hopscotch.
Dylan Burns is a cool dude. You should definitely check him out.
All right.
Yeah, and I've got a question. Yeah, I know Dylan Burns is a good lad. Although he's a bit of a lib. So I've got a question here from Scuff Dario. This is to both of you. Will you vote for Biden?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I will. I can't let Trump. I know it's very likely that Trump will steamroll Biden because Biden can't, like, his brain's melting. But I mean, like, I think that Biden sucks, but Trump is just so openly antagonistic to so many marginalized groups in America that even if Biden is like the back to normal centrist, no change candidate, it would still be better for like marginalized groups in America than Trump. There's a meme that shows like it's a meme that's like Bernie or Busters, and it's just like a guy sitting there in a chair, and then there's an explosion behind him, a car exploding, and it's marginalized groups when Trump gets reelected.
Yeah, I won't vote. I won't do Bernie or bust for a few. I mean, I won't vote for Biden for a few reasons. I think that it's sort of like, the Democratic Party has spit in our faces for like a long time. They've been complete dicks to us, and I feel like I don't want to like contribute to the machine. I know people in my community, the vast majority, are going to disagree with me on this, but I feel as though neoliberal centrism and that kind of dogmatic school of thought has been the predominant ideology for decades, and I think that it enables fascism to a very dangerous degree. And I think Trump is just the stepping stone. I think someone way worse than Trump is going to take power eventually.
The problem is, I have a few disagreements here. Really quick, I have a question for you. Are you cis?
No.
Okay, I was gonna say, if you were a cis, like, white straight person, like, that was pretty privileged, then that would be sort of like, I would probably say, like, yeah, you're not really affected that much if Trump gets reelected at the end of the day, and neither am I. I am probably about as privileged as you can possibly be without being like a really a rich person. I'm straight white cis male. All that mean. I wouldn't really be affected by Trump being elected all that much. Or no more than the rest of the working class would be, at least. But the problem is the DNC at the end of the day, they would prefer Trump being elected to Bernie being elected. They know Bernie beats Trump. There's a reason why they're making sure Bernie isn't the nominee. Bernie being elected hurts the DNC establishment more than Trump being president does. At the end of the day, the way politics in America isn't the West Wing, the show West Wing. It isn't like that. Most of these people are all very rich. They're all friends. They still go to each other's fondue and cocktail parties. They're all still extremely wealthy. They're all still looking out for each other's best interest, which is usually making a shit ton of money, preserving capitalism for as long as possible, and making, once again, as much money as possible. At the end of the day, they're all buddies. They're all fucking friends. The Republicans and the Democrats. Guarantee it.
So. Yeah, like I was gonna say, like, yeah, there's a lot of privileged people that are Bernie or bust. I mean, I can be based on the laws that Trump has opened the doorway to. Like, I can be discriminated from housing if I'm homeless. There's a lot of dangerous obstacles that have been set up, but I find neoliberal economics to be a very consequentially dangerous thing. And I think that people who believe in neoliberal economics oftentimes don't know the mess that they're getting into. That's all I can say.
Well, I understand. I understand that the liberals always side with fascism and whatnot, but when we have a literal fascist, and yes, I will say this, Trump is a fascist. When we have a literal fascist who we have the opportunity to at least try to get out of the office, instead to put in place a centrist, like, neolib candidate that's undoubtedly not as bad as Trump with his policies. Especially when you consider climate change.
He's still a former segregationist.
He was a segregationist. He was against Roe versus Wade. Trust me, I know his past. You are preaching to the choir. However, he at the very least acknowledges a lot of issues, or some issues that are relevant, way more than Trump. He doesn't literally believe that climate change is a made-up conspiracy by China, which is a big one. Climate change is a big issue that's really relevant to this. Bernie would obviously do way more. Basically, every candidate that ran would do way more. But if if it comes down,
I think Biden, the best he'll do on climate change is the Paris Climate Accord. I think that's the best he'll
accomplish. Something more than Trump will do, and I don't think he'll put a climate change denier to be the head of the EPA. He won't defund the CDC. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of very tangible things that Biden would do better than Trump, even though I hate Biden. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a repeat of 2016. Trump's going to get reelected. He's united the Republican Party in favor of him. Biden has done nothing but fracture the Democrat Party. Trump's going to get reelected either way. I'm going to vote for Biden still, though. I'm going to go down fighting.
So just to confirm, are we saying Orange Man bad?
Orange Man is indeed that.
Yeah,
Is indeed
absolutely.
bad.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. We can agree on that at least, right? Okay.
Yeah, just to give like a 5-second summary of my position, like
Yeah, sure.
I just think that Trump is a precursor to something way worse, and I think Biden's gonna open the doorway to something way worse than you can imagine. Like to me, Trump is like Otto von Bismarck in Germany, and who's basically a fascist, and then Hitler's like something next level, and I feel like that could come to America if we continue to embrace free market economics. And
So I understand where you're coming from. I think it would be very beneficial for like progressives in America if the last year of Trump's presidency was the year where America was devastated in quotes by a virus that was able to take hold in America so effectively because Trump was the one who defunded the CDC and treated it so irresponsibly. If this last year the World War III meme and coronavirus alone are big hits on Trump as like a president, if his final year being a president, people look back at all of this, because this is what people remember, the last year of his presidency. This is what people look back on and remember when they go to the polls to vote for a Republican again. I feel like if this is the last thing people remember from Trump being president, it would be way more beneficial for us getting more progressive people elected in the future.
yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a fair point.
Okay, cool. And sorry, I'll ask one more question here. So, a question for both of them. How does the left address the absolutely blatant voter suppression and vote tampering in this election, in each of your opinions?
All I can do is yell about it. Holy shit. My parents, I argue with them over the phone all the time. I've done it on stream. They're hardcore. They used to be progressives. Like back in 2016, they supported Bernie, but now they're Democrats first, progressives second, if you can even say they're progressives. My mom unironically was defending Joe Biden being against what he called forced busing back in the was it 60s? And I tried to tell her forced busing was a dog whistle used during the Southern strategy. Joe Biden was against desegregation. She was still arguing it. First, she was a Buttigieg supporter, then a Warren supporter, then a fucking Biden supporter, never Bernie. I tried to explain the voter suppression. I don't know how you get through to these people. There's really nothing you can do. The DNC is way more powerful than us. The average Democrat voter doesn't give a fuck about the voter suppression enough to actually do anything about it. All we can do is try to get our votes in despite what they try to do to get in our way. That's the most.
Yeah, I mean, the media is never going to like talk about voter suppression in the way it should be talked.
They absolutely
like,
won't. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
that's true, Lonnie. My parents were Warren supporters for 48 hours until she dropped out. Good meme.
Okay, so we'll call it to an end there. Just before, because I'm going to leave the voice chat and take my stream on and talk about some other things. Would you mind, Xander, if I just quickly shield myself to your stream?
Absolutely, yeah. Go ahead. You're a great dude.
Okay, great stuff. So I'm Chud Logic. I make sort of reactionary agitation type content. So I just mock reactionaries. I'm behind the Stephen Crowder dog cum meme. You may have seen the hashtag Stephen Crowder drinks dog cum. So that's probably my most famous escapade so far. Just search Chud Logic everywhere and you'll find me. And obviously on Twitch, Chud Logic, all one word. And that's it.
Can I suck myself up for a few seconds too?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Take turns though.
Yeah, I'm Zoomer Nation. Just look up Zoomer Nation on YouTube. You'll find me. Make sure to subscribe. I have some good content, and yeah.
Great
nice
stuff.
memes.
Okay, and Xanderhal, I mean, obviously, people probably know who you are in my chat, but do you want to show yourself quickly before you go, just in case?
My name is Xander Hall. You might have formerly known me as Pig Puncher. I do leftist streamed content. I occasionally make videos that are like, if it's like a really important topic I want to make sure not to mess anything up on, I'll do prepared videos with the script, but mostly I do a live stream format where I talk about a subject in front of with my chat on screen and everything, or respond to a video, and I've been growing pretty well. It's been pretty nice, and if you want to check me out and that's something you're interested in, give me a look. And for people who are watching me, be sure to check out Zoomer Nation and Chud Logic. They're pretty cool people.
Great stuff. Okay, thanks very much. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I hope chat had a good time, and I'll speak to you both later, I'm sure.
Have a good one.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye bye.